clearly should win, in my opinion, the quarterback is holding them back. The quarterback is clearly holding them back. So, listen, if he continues to play like this, and Greeny, I have already said at some point we could possibly. I think we see Jalen Hurts in there.
You made that your bold prediction on this program before the season began, that we would see starts for Jalen Hurts this season. And I will admit that I thought you sounded crazy at the time. It doesn't sound quite as crazy right now. I'd love to hear David Pollack's perspective on this. As you watch the situation with Wentz in Philly, what are you seeing, David?
Unfortunately, we all had to watch that on Sunday Night Football. It was the only game that was on. Watching the Cowboys and the Eagles, whew, good Lord, was it bad. Listen, Carson Wentz's physical tools show up consistently, right? We always see it time and time again. He makes a couple throws and you go, good Lord. I remember when he came in the league years ago, literally when he was making his MVP run before he tore his knee up. I was like, good Lord, this dude's special. Playmaking, ability to play in the pocket, outside the pocket, break some tackles. Now I look at him and I go, this dude's reckless. You're playing against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. Newsflash, they can't score. They're atrocious. We know they're not going to put points on the board consistently. The only way they're going to put points up is if you help them. And what do? You donate fumbles. You're giving them fumbles trying to make extra plays. You don't just take what they give you, move the sticks. You're a better team clearly across the board. So I think up here with Carson Wentz is where he's struggling. We've got to be able to get through things quicker and get the ball out of my hands. It can't be as much backyard ball, scramble around, make plays. Some of those look great, but some of those look atrocious like Damien Woody talked about. So it's definitely pointing down more than it is pointing up with Carson Wentz, and it's been consistent now for weeks upon weeks upon weeks with him.
It has. Neek, what do you think?
Well, I'm just looking for opportunities to crowbar my guy Dak into the conversation. I just remember, I'm not going to name any names, but I remember last season arguing with some people on this show, and they were telling me, so the difference is Carson makes his team better, and Dak is made better by his team. My, how the daggum tables have turned, because it sure daggum seems like the daggum Cowboys are a lot worse without Dak Prescott, and we look at Carson Wentz, and everyone keeps going back to that MVP caliber season, the season where they went on a playoff run and won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. That suggests to me that the talent around Carson Wentz was lifting him up much more than he was lifting them. And we look at it now, how the Cowboys look without Dak and how the Eagles look with Wentz. And to Wentz's credit, they are in a tough situation with injuries on the offensive line and to their playmakers. But it seems like they are really, really bad. They are really saved by the fact that the rest of that division was bad, because otherwise they'd be at the bottom of just about every other division in football.
Yeah, that's fair. And just to sort of put a ribbon on the conversation, they can play Jalen Hurts if they want to, but Dan Graziano, the contract suggests Carson Wentz isn't going anywhere.
No, fully guaranteed $30 million this year, $25 million next year. There's a guaranteed roster bonus for 2022 that kicks in next March. They're married to Carson Wentz contractually. And
God, I want to be a quarterback, man.
Right? Significant lack of production at the wide receiver position after Devontae Adams. The fall off from that is significant. There were also questions about all the help they might need on defense after Dalvin Cook ran all over them this past weekend. So my insider, Dan Graziano, who is here, why didn't the Packers make a move?
because they're the Packers is the simple answer, right? They don't tend to add a lot of players from outside their organization. They don't want to give up draft picks, especially for a player they might only have for a couple of months because he's in the last year of his contract. And quite frankly, the players they checked in on, be they wide receivers, be they linebackers, they felt like the price was too high given the return. You're not often going to get the difference maker that puts you over the top at the NFL trade deadline. If you are, then you make a different decision. But the Packers determined that they weren't, and therefore they held on to their draft picks because that's the foundation of their team year in, year out.
Yeah, and so let me bring my crew back in here. I want to get Neek and I will stay on one here. And I want to bring Neek and D-Wood into the conversation here. Good look, we had an argument off the top of the show here, and there's no point in going over it again. I firmly believe they needed to add a weapon, and Dominique, you seem to disagree. But I will just ask you the question as simply as I can. Do you believe, as you look at the landscape of the NFC, where Seattle added a piece and Tampa added a significant piece, do you believe the Green Bay Packers have a real chance to win the championship this year?
I mean, if Aaron Rodgers plays out of his mind like he was early in the season, maybe it's possible, but I would bet against that happening. But I would throw it back at you, Greeny. Who's the one player that they could bring in that would dramatically change their standing in the NFC? I don't think that player was out there without completely mortgaging your entire future. I don't know who you bring in that's going to suddenly make this defense top tier, or that's going to take this offense to unstoppable from where it is now with Aaron Rodgers and Adam.
I've been saying the name for over a week, Dominique. I've been saying the name Will Fuller. Will Fuller catches a touchdown every single week. He takes the top off of a defense. He adds another significant weapon. Aaron Rodgers, if he finds himself in a shootout with Brady in a playoff game where Brady's got a million different places to look on the field, he doesn't have the pieces to do it. And Will Fuller, I genuinely believe, is that piece. And NFL teams treat these draft picks like they're gold. A second-round pick is no better than a 50-50 proposition. You'd be very lucky to get a player as good as Will Fuller on the second round in any conceivable year. So I've been saying that name for a while. I think he would make a difference.
Yeah, for a couple of weeks, and then you either re-sign him for a lot of money, which impacts your future, or you bring him in and then you lose him after a couple of weeks. I'm not sure that they are in a position where it would be wise to mortgage their future for Will Fuller, a player who's perpetually injured. And again, I don't think that this makes that offense that much more potent, and it certainly does nothing for their biggest problem, which is their inability to stop the run. It seems to me like it's a short-sighted decision, and the Packers are right now trying to play the long game.
Okay, so we have just come upon the crux of our disagreement. When you have Aaron Rodgers at your quarterback position, I do not believe you should be playing the long game. I believe when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback and he is the age that he is, Damien Woody, let me bring you into this conversation. How many Super Bowl rings do you have?
2.
Would you trade either of them for anything in the world? I mean, how valuable is one championship? That's what I'm asking here. We're worried about the future already. I see you rolling your eyes, Dominique, but if you could win a championship here, it's worth mortgaging your future for. Damien Woody, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Greeny, here's my question. You think Will Fuller brings you a championship?
Thank you.
Thank you. That is the question, Greeny, that I think Dominique and everyone is flipping to you. Do you think Will Fuller brings the Green Bay Packers a championship?
Let me answer that question this way. It is by saying that the entire way that the organization has behaved, going back to last year's draft, is that they have not prioritized whether any one individual move or not would be the one that puts them over the top. They have prioritized their future over their present consistently. And that is the philosophy with which I disagree. When you have that quarterback at this stage of his career, I don't think you're thinking about where we're going to be a few years from now, which goes all the way back to drafting the quarterback they did in the first round this year in the first place. Graziano, go ahead.
If they're prioritizing their future over their present, then they're getting really lucky in the present because they were 13-3 last year. They're 5-2 right now, and they're in first place. They are a very good team, one of the very best in the league. You're talking about a team that went to the NFC Championship game. Yeah, they got crushed. If they play that game 10 more times, you're sure they're going to lose all 10? I mean, you've got to get yourself into the game. And on the value of second-round picks, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, and Randall Cobb that's a list of players that the Packers drafted in the second round. They believe that the second-round pick is a pretty valuable thing, especially when it comes to getting weapons for their quarterback.
I totally understand that. I could also sit here and give you a list of second-round picks that no one ever heard from again. So, Dominique, I think if we could sort of put a ribbon on the conversation, do we agree now that having gone back and forth all this way that obviously I'm right?
Absolutely not, Mike Greenberg. You are wrong. Me, Dan, Damien, and the